Random House Audio presents The Art of Aging, A Doctor's Prescription for Well-Being by Sherwin B. Nuland. This is the author, Sherwin B. Nuland. The Art of Aging. About 5 years ago, I had a brief experience that since then has helped me to tell the difference between nurturing a sense of vibrant good health and nurturing the delusion of being still young. Put somewhat differently, I learned that a man of advanced years who has never felt himself hemmed in by chronology should nevertheless not allow himself to forget his chronology entirely. The event took place late on a September afternoon when I, along with my wife and younger daughter, had just entered a New York subway car at the Times Square station. Pushed forward by the advancing throng of rush-hour passengers, we were crammed together single file, with 19-year-old Molly in the middle and me packed in behind her. Between my back and the door stood someone whom my peripheral vision had recognized only as a tall, broad-shouldered man, perhaps in his late 30s. No sooner had the train gotten underway than the fellow's bare right arm reached around past me, its hand extending forward in an obvious attempt to make contact with Molly's buttocks. As taken aback as I was by the man's brazenness, I did have the presence of mind to do what any father might. I pressed my body rearward, just firmly enough to push him up against the car's door, putting Molly beyond the reach of his outstretched fingers. As though by some form of unspoken New York agreement, both he and I acted as if nothing had happened, and the train continued on its clattering way over the subterranean tracks. But I was wrong to think that the episode was over. Scarcely half a minute had passed before I became aware of a barely perceptible creeping thing, surreptitiously entering the right-hand pocket of my khaki trousers. Any thought that imagination was playing tricks on me was dispelled a moment later when I was able to feel an unmistakable sensation through the fabric of fingertips moving around inside the empty pocket. In the flashing eye blink of time that followed, it never occurred to me that I should consider the consequences of what I instantaneously decided must be done. In fact, decided is hardly the word. My next actions were virtually automatic. I plunged my hand into the pocket, transversely surrounded the bony knuckles of a palm wider than my own, and squeezed down with every bit of force I could muster. Aware that I was gritting my teeth with the effort, I did not let go until I felt more than heard the sickening sensation of bone grating on bone, and then something giving way under the straining pressure of my encircling fingers. A baritone roar of pain brought me back to my 71-year-old self and made me realize that I had gone too far. What had I let myself in for? Would not the simple act of removing the intruding extremity have sufficed? Or perhaps I should have done nothing. The pocket was, after all, as empty as it always is when I anticipate being in a crowded, chancy place. Made overconfident by hundreds of hours spent pumping iron in a local gym, I had succumbed to an unthinking impulse, dictating that I crush the felonious hand. As the first flush of instinct faded, I all at once became certain that my victim's revenge would now swiftly follow. Alarmed by that thought, I relaxed my grip and felt the mauled organ whip out of my pocket. But who could have predicted that the response would take the form that it did? With his torso still pressed up between my back and the train's doors, my antagonist inexplicably shouted out a garbled accusation for all to hear about my having tried to steal my bag. Being certain that I had misheard, and anticipating a powerful assault, I awkwardly turned my body around in those compressed quarters in order to confront the expected assault as effectively as my acute attack of nervous remorse might allow. Having managed that, I found myself looking up into the anguished but nevertheless infuriated face of a thuggish-looking, unshaven tough, 3 inches taller than I and quite a bit broader. I noted with some relief that the injured right hand hung limply alongside his thick-chested body. Tucked up into his left armpit was a bulging, deep-green plastic portfolio, its top barely held closed by a tightly stretched zipper. This, no doubt, was the pouch in which was held the loot of a day's pocket pilfering. Seeing the flaccid, useless hand dangling from the muscular but now inactivated forearm momentarily revived my unthinking and foolhardy courage. Looking directly into the bloodshot eyes glowering at me, and now able to smell liquor on the thick breath blowing down into my face, I roared back as though I were Samson, "You had your hand in my pocket!" Something stopped me before I added, "You son of a bitch," which was a lucky thing because as soon as the first words were out of my mouth, I regretted them. Fearful once more, I prepared for the violent response that would surely follow. But the fates were with me. Just at that moment, the train pulled into the next station, and my foeman charged out through the doors as they slid open, clumping off toward an exit staircase as fast as he could, until his forward motion was slowed by a bunched-up throng of passengers tumbling out of the next car. He was swallowed up among them until only the top of his bobbing head could be seen. In a moment, he was gone, leaving me standing there, thinking of how close I had come to my own immolation. I turned toward Molly and my wife, who later told me that my face was pale and bloodless. I felt as though rescued from certain death by a last-second reprieve. My hands were shaking, and my knees seemed just a bit uncertain about whether they intended to continue holding me up. It was several minutes and another station's traveling before they steadied themselves. But everything finally stabilized, and I was then faced with the embarrassment of having to withstand the 2 women's justifiably withering comments about how foolish I had been. During the short period of Sturm und Drang, they later told me, not a single person in that overcrowded subway car had so much as glanced in my direction or otherwise acknowledged that anything unusual was taking place. I present this story as an example of a conflict within myself, a conflict that I suspect exists in the minds of many men and women beyond the age of perhaps their middle 50s. On the one hand, we recognize that age is ever increasing its effects on us, and now requires not only acceptance, but a gradually changing way of thinking about ourselves and the years to come. On the other, some narcissistic genie within us cannot give up clinging to bits of the fantasy that we can still call on vast wellsprings of that self-same undiminished youth to whose ebbing our better selves are trying to become reconciled. The same formula that enhances our later years, continued mental stimulation, strenuous physical exercise, and unlessened engagement in life's challenges and rewards, sometimes fosters an unrealistic confidence that the vitality thus maintained means that we are virtually the same as we were decades earlier, even in appearance, ready to challenge youth in its own arenas, in outbursts of denial and bad judgment that are virtually instinctual. We at such times discard an equanimity that has taken years to develop and indulge ourselves in behavior foolhardy and foolish, as though using it as an amulet to stave off the very process to which we have so successfully been accommodating by consciously sustaining our bodies and minds. The tension between the two is very likely stronger in the case of men, but nonetheless common in women as well, though manifesting itself in somewhat different forms. This rivalry within ourselves reflects a rivalry with you.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?